Speaking of this virus, what's its impact on the music industry from your point of view? The 2008 financial crash, that nearly ruined my career. Beringers making a free door, what are your thoughts? Would you have any suggestions for creative types suddenly finding themselves without income? I'm guessing if you're watching this video and if you've made it this far into this video, you're a music production nerd, whether you think you are or not. Oof, how to finish an artist album? You're asking the wrong person. Hey guys, welcome to the Kane audio vlog. It's Friday, it's time for another Ask Me Anything. Usual rules apply, comment anything you want below this video and I'll get back to you in next week's video. Before I look at last week's questions, house admin, I think we know what the main topic of this week is going to be, let's be honest. So first of all, my thoughts are with anyone and everyone affected by coronavirus. I hope that all of you viewers are safe and well and being sensible. Yeah, it's kind of throwing everything out, isn't it? So I think first of all it's worth pointing out that this virus is having a huge impact on the creative, freelance, self-employed sector. I mean, it's having an impact on every sector, and you know, there's no denying that. But I know from my own experience, you know, looking at things like Facebook this week, you wouldn't believe the amount of, obviously, the vast majority of my friends are DJs and producers, and they're getting gigs cancelled left, right, and centre. Some of them, you know, have had entire tours cancelled. So yeah, if you're fortunate enough to be in a comfortable position, I suggest you find their whoever your favourite artist is, find their Bandcamp page or something, and you know, grab one of their tracks or something. I think there's a lot of people going through a lot of difficult times right now. So I wish that this intro could be a bit more positive, but I don't know, it's not. On a irrelevantly, insignificantly more positive term, I have updated the Spotify playlist. So if you are quarantining yourself or self-isolating or just stuck at home with not much to do, the Spotify playlist is updated, so please check that out. And of course, as for my Patreon viewers, we're getting very close to the amount needed for the Hackintosh. I'm still just saving up those monthlies at the minute, so yeah, that's all looking good. And yeah, hopefully, what with everything going on in the world at the moment, that doesn't have an impact. I don't think it will. It should be fine, I hope. But you just don't know what's around the corner. So I'm going to start at the start, looking at last week's video. FanFan87, Salut Dom, Glitch and Coronavirus. High five and high five. Wash your hands before the high fives. Too late. Speaking of this virus, what's its impact on the music industry from your point of view? I hope you're safe and your family too. So first of all, yeah, me and my family are safe, although I think extended family, we do have a couple of people who are compromised. So, but in this household, we're fine. The impact on the industry, you know what? There's going to be a knock-on effect that I don't think we really see the impact of for a while yet. You know, it's always, I know that from experience, I'm somewhat lucky right now because I've had my bad luck before. For anyone who remembers the 2008 financial crash, that nearly ruined my career. At the time, 2007, 2008 was... I had a residency at Ministry of Sound, a residency at Space in Ibiza. I had regular gigs around places like Egypt and Russia and, well, most of Eastern Europe. I was in Eastern Europe almost every 2 weeks or so, gigging, and everything was great. And then the financial crash happened, and it was a global crash. So, of course, when people are losing money left, right and centre, what's the first thing to go? It's their nights out, the big events. So the events within a couple of months of the crash, I remember where I was sort of going to Eastern Europe every couple of weeks. Now all of a sudden it was, I don't know, it was once a month, then maybe once every 2 months, then once every 3 months, and it was just getting less and less. And within maybe 6 months to a year of the recession, I had lost probably 90% of my income. So it was a bit of a scramble, and I made things work. I'm fine. I mean, I'm not moaning, but what I am concerned about now is that there are people in that similar situation. So I learned as much as I could. I'll be honest, maybe some of it was more luck than judgment. I don't know. But now I've sort of spent the last 12 years since then sort of rebuilding my career with a slightly different business model, I suppose. So it's a bit more stable, I hope. In that I don't have to fly anywhere. I'm not relying on gigs necessarily. But look, it's still the creative industry, so who knows what's going to happen. We'll just watch and see. But this is kind of my point, is answering your question, how it impacts the industry. I think we sometimes forget. In fact, I was talking to a friend yesterday who was kind of hadn't really thought about it too much, but was kind of questioning why Eurovision Song Contest was cancelled, because I was sort of explaining that it's one of my guilty pleasures. I love watching Eurovision Song Contest, and as I was sort of explaining the basics, in that, well, it kind of makes sense that you can't really have too many people in a room, so you'd have to do it without the audience. And then let's think about how many performers there are. Well, there's nearly 100 performers, plus all their crew and all the staging and all the stage hands and the camera crew and the editors, and then you start adding everything up and you think, actually, there's hundreds and hundreds of people involved in all of that show. And I used an example where the UFC went ahead last week without an audience, and that was fine because the ban was on gatherings of 100 people or more. So they had 2 fighters, a referee, 3 judges, the cut crew, and whatever teams, and it was nowhere near 100. Easy enough. Now they've changed it to no gatherings of 10 or more people. Well, they can't do it. Once you've added up the fighters, the referees, the judges, and the corner crews, you're done. You can't fit any cameramen or editors or directors or whatever. All the people, all the engineers, the people who have to build these things. They take entire crews and lorry loads of people to build these things. So going back to Eurovision, if you look at, then you start looking at maybe how many people it takes to build the set design, and how to put the stages up and all of these things. There's a huge knock-on effect to those people and their families, because they had what they thought was this job. It was a big job. It was the Eurovision. So there's going to be hundreds and hundreds of people there. And then if you look at all those performers, I don't know how many performers there are, I can't think, but let's say there's 50 odd, or maybe, well, plus their crews, you're looking at several hundred. Well, that's several hundred hotel rooms. So now the hotel staff are missing out, and several hundred flights. So all the flight staff are missing out. So the knock-on effect from one music event can be devastating throughout, and that's not including the obvious things of the crowd who are going to be there buying tickets and buying alcohol at the event at the stadium. They would have probably made a holiday out of it and made a long weekend. I think most people do who go to Eurovision. They make a long weekend out of it, and they'll be in the bars and the clubs and the cafes and the restaurants, and so there's a huge impact, and this is just one event. And we've already had cancelled this week Glastonbury, and I know a lot of festival promoters kind of use Glastonbury as their sort of their weather vane. And now that Glastonbury's cancelled this year, I should imagine a lot of smaller festivals will cancel. I know I'm scheduled to play at a couple, and I'm assuming they're going to be cancelled. They haven't officially been yet, but I honestly don't. I can't see them going ahead at this point. And this is where it then becomes tricky, where our government, unfortunately, are not really following suit to other governments where they've put a ban on things. And I think this is where it becomes tricky. If you're a club promoter, and I've seen a lot of my friends in this situation who put on events, they have to cancel the event voluntarily because they're not being forced to shut down the event by the government. And they would rather be forced to shut down the event by the government, because then they can at least claim insurance and get the basic costs covered. At the minute, they're having to voluntarily close it down, because if you've paid $5,000 for a DJ to headline your event, and nobody's going to turn up, you're losing $5,000. If you can cancel that DJ a week in advance, you might lose your 50% deposit or whatever, so you're losing less by voluntarily cancelling, but you're still losing lots of money, and that's without the fact that their flights will have been cancelled, and it's just chaos at the minute. So the impact on the music industry is massive, not just nightclubs, but pretty much everything. And I know that I've been working on my album, and if people, if I've had to sort of push the release date back, even though it was only penciled in, so it's not a big deal for me, but I'm just using it as an example. If it was scheduled, let's say, to come out, I don't know, 2 weeks' time, it wasn't, but let's say it was coming out in 2 weeks' time. Think about how many people are losing their job right now, or just unsure of their job right now. So in 2 weeks' time, are they going to want to be spending money on an album? Probably not. So I don't know. Who knows? It's I think the wider impact is yet to be seen. Edit 1, I've seen you've put here. You asked me to post the link of my very first release some AMAs ago. So here it is. Thanks for your advices. Right, I am opening that in a new window. I can see it's a Spotify link, and I will post a link below this video. So everyone check out FanFan87's track below this video. Thank you very much. Cheers. Moving on. Yanis Lockmells, not Lockmellis. Hi Dom, you are right about my name. I have one letter less in my surname for some weeks. There we go. I thought maybe I was going mad. But no. Good. I'm glad. I have a question too, which I think already have many good answers, but want to hear your opinion. Oof, how to finish an artist album? You're asking the wrong person. I have 9 tracks almost written and produced. However, final 5 to 10% comes with big pain. I'm making music for many years, but this is work where I'm challenging myself with each track. I can do sound design, music, mixing, and even sing, but quality result takes serious time and attention. Should I set drastic deadlines, go track by track, or even pay somebody to do some work? Actually, 3 of the tracks you've heard on audio.net some years ago. Okay. So, and then I can see you've put in coronavirus, high five, is getting too much undeserved popularity. I don't think it's undeserved, if I'm honest with you. I think it's very much deserved. This is new ground for everyone. You know, people keep relating it to the flu. It's not the flu. It's nothing like the flu. For starters, it's a respiratory one, so it's far more lethal to those at risk. It's also a brand new strain, so we don't have any antibodies. We don't know how it works. We don't know anything about it. I say we, the scientific community, don't know anything about it. There are no vaccines, at least with the flu. You know, scientists can judge and follow the flu and work out which one's going to hit this year, which strain, of which there are many, and they can decide which vaccine to push that year to the most vulnerable and the immunocompromised people. Something like this, you know, there is nothing to push. There's no herd immunity. There's no barrier. So those who are at risk, if they are immunocompromised and they get it, there's nothing anyone can do. It's you know, it's worst case scenario. So I think it is a very, very serious situation, and I think we need to, as much as I don't think anybody should be panicking, I do think we should be very, very sensible. And there are also people with the illness that show no symptoms, and that I think is very scary, because for the reasons I've just said, for the immunocompromised, you know, if you have a grandfather with lung disease or whatever, you know, it's huge. So back to your question though. How to finish an artist album. That's a tricky one. So I think I can only speak from experience, and from my experience, I really didn't. I like to work to deadlines. I much prefer, you know, look at these AMAs. The fact that I force myself to do them every Friday means that I do them every Friday, and I enjoy that. If you know, and if you look at the other videos that I never make on this video channel, it's because there's no strict deadline and I struggle. So with an album though, because it's such a huge body of work, I kind of felt like I had to have no deadline at the beginning, or just a vague deadline. So I think in my head, I wanted it finished by the end of 2019, and I think I was really picking that date in the middle of 2018. So I was giving myself a good year and a half to do it. And I'd decided I wanted it to have a theme. I wanted the whole thing to tell a whole story. I didn't want just 10 singles. I know in dance music, people keep putting out albums and it's just 10, 12, 15 singles. And to me, that's not an album, that's a compilation. There's a big difference with an album. An album needs to have continuity. It needs to gel together. And I wanted to take that further and tell a unique story throughout. So it needs to thread throughout the album. So I knew 18 months was a rough, that's kind of where I thought that's how long it should take me. So yeah, my deadline was the end of 2019. We're in March 2020. But by the end of 2019, I kind of felt like I was 80% there, maybe 90% like you were. And then if you remember, for anyone who's a long-time follower of these videos, I think it was about the end of 2019 where I decided, nope, I'm starting again. And I tore half of it apart and sort of started again with that. And I'm glad I did, because it's much, much better now. So that's where I was at. Now I've written the album at the beginning of this year. I think, was it January, February? Wasn't that long ago, maybe a month ago. I kind of finished all the writing, the production. I'm now at the stage where I'm talking to a few labels. I'm looking at maybe self-releasing. There's lots of options, and now I'm sort of working on all the admin stuff. And there's a huge amount of work. I'm expecting it to come out probably the end of this year. So I think you need to sort of set yourself some rough deadlines. But for example, now I've kind of had it written, or once I was sort of 80%, I kind of then went, right, I need it done by X, Y, and Z date. So I think you need to be at a position where you're confident, because the last thing you want to do is set yourself a deadline and then rush everything. Because again, like I say, to me, an album needs to be a consistent body of work that tells a story, and you can't rush that. You don't, and I don't mean rush like there's just a couple of clicks and pops or whatever in the production. We can allow for those, but I mean, what you don't want is to release an album of 12 tracks, and 3 of them in a year's time you're going to listen to and go, oh, they were terrible, why did I do that? Or, well, they're just boring, or they don't do anything, or they didn't grab you. I'm proud to say that the 10-track album I've written, every single one of those 10 tracks I'm proud of, and I've been listening to regularly for 6 months, and I'm still proud of them. So I hope that by the time the album comes out, I'll still be proud of them. So it's kind of tricky when it comes to setting deadlines. If you worked it better to deadlines, then set deadlines, but just be aware that you need to be able to change those deadlines as well. If you're, you can't push yourself. You need to be realistic. You can't make yourself rush an album, because otherwise you're going to be the one that's pissed off. And if it's your album and you're putting it out yourself, then you're not going to want to promote it. It's going to suck. So just, I guess, be careful. The other thing I would say is, if you're struggling to just get that last bit finished, then maybe having a professional mix engineer could help. Maybe try it with just, I'm not saying get a mix engineer to do your whole album all in one go, because that's a lot of money, but maybe just get them to do 1 or 2 tracks that you already like, and get them to do a mix and master, and just see how you feel about it then. Because you might feel that you listen to it as though it's a different track then. You might feel that it kind of gives your tracks a breath of fresh air, and maybe that sort of reinvigorates things and gets you a bit more excited about having the finished product. And I think that kind of changes things sometimes. So yeah, otherwise always show me on Audio again, and I'll have a listen there. But yeah, good luck. Cavalcade, glitch and coronavirus. High five and high five. Talking of which, there's a lot on socials about DJs, performers and others in the music industry effectively losing their income almost overnight due to performances being cancelled, which is the right thing to do, of course, if we're honest about it. Would you have any suggestions for creative types suddenly finding themselves without income? Hope you and yours are all well. So, in terms of suggestions, I don't know if there is any other than, I hate to say it, but just grafting, really. Like I explained, that happened to me in the 2008 financial crash, and I more out of desperation than anything, I had to graft by contacting every client I'd ever had, basically, and just sort of seeing what was available, what I could do. It's not easy. The one thing I will say, though, is please do look at government websites. I know that our government here in the UK, and I'm pretty sure other countries, especially European countries, are offering better than our government. But as far as I'm aware, our government are offering like a universal credit type top up thing. Yeah. So if your income drops, then you'd certainly look at that. I honestly don't know how it works. I've not looked into it in any detail, but it is there. If I can find it while I'm editing this video, then I'll drop a link below, just in case. But yeah, it's just incredibly tricky with stuff like that, because creative jobs are usually the ones that get thrown out the window first. And this includes people like graphic designers. If you're running a successful business, and that successful business, let's say you run a call center or a shop or whatever, and all of a sudden your revenue is plummeting because of this event, you're less likely to use things like graphics designers and web designers and things like that, let alone musicians and producers and DJs. So, like I explained earlier on, there is a huge knock-on effect, and I think half of which we're not even seeing the tip of the iceberg yet. So, I don't mean to be scaremongering. I really hope I'm not scaremongering, but I think, as much as I feel like everything I've said in this whole video has been somewhat dark and pessimistic, I also want it to be for a reason, because I want people to be sensible. And when I'm saying be sensible, you need to start thinking about these things just in case. And, if these things don't happen to you, brilliant, bonus, you were smart and responsible. If they do happen to you, well, at least you're aware of what you can do and where you can go and how you can combat it. And I think that's important to be aware. So, for example, a lot of my income, I would say the majority of my income, is not necessarily public-facing, event-based. So it's not. I'm not DJing that much these days. Yeah, don't get me wrong. Pretty much every gig I had this year is pretty much guaranteed to be cancelled, but that's not my main income. But I'm aware that my income is based on the next level, the next knock-on effect. So I'm very aware that that I have to already start looking at, well, if this thing, if this revenue becomes zero, how do I replace that? Where can I replace that? And what can I do? So, like I say, you've just got to be sensible and just think about these things. I can see you've edited your comment. So how are you planning to spend your time during the lockdown period that it's looking more likely that we've got coming our way in the UK? All the best to our friends and comrades already going through that elsewhere in the world. Hope you're all coping okay and keeping well. Yeah, 100%. I can echo that comment. So yeah, I mean, for me, a lockdown is just a normal day, because I work from home and I don't really talk to people. You guys are my friends. So it's not got a huge impact on me. I'm okay. And I think, as most of you will probably already know, with a baby in the house, my significant other is off on maternity leave anyway, so that's unaffected. But again, her job, who knows if she has one to go back to. There's all of that. So but schools are closed, so that's had an impact. So we're all home. But yeah, who knows? But again, like I say, I'm kind of thinking maybe I should be doing more of these AMAs. Maybe I should be doing more of these videos, because for those of you who are at home with nothing to do, and if you're music production nerds, and I'm guessing if you're watching this video and if you've made it this far into this video, you're a music production nerd, whether you think you are or not. Then maybe I should be doing more. I don't know. You guys tell me if you think I should be doing more, because look, if I can do more, if I can help, I will. So yeah, P.S. Just watching Sonic Academy, Sonic Talk. Apparently Anna 2 is 45 squids at the moment. Tempting. There we go. That's some positive news right there. I can also see my camera is about to reset itself, so I'm going to do that before the next question. And I'm back. Okay, there's only a couple to go through now. Francesco Di Carlo. Stay sensible. You are a great person. That was him quoting me saying stay sensible. Thank you very much. And also, I did get your message about everything, and I hope you are okay in Italy. Yes, and thank you for the information. Not your human. Beringer's, or is it Beringer or Beringer? I never know. Beringer's making a free door. What are your thoughts? I have high hopes for it, and I want it to be better or as good as Ableton, because Ableton is really expensive. Also, coronavirus, high five. Okay, well, first of all, I would say don't get your hopes up. Ableton has been around for, is it nearly 20 years? It can't be that long now. It feels so new. That's scary. I think nearly 20 years. So the guys there have some significant experience in coding and developing a DAW. One thing I will say, though, is that I think developers can look at things differently now. And by that I mean what people needed from a workstation 20 years ago is very different to what people needed from a workstation now. So I think you can go into it with a different mindset, and if you're creating it from the ground up, you know, if you look at, for example, Ableton, actually, you know, by version 7, 8, 9, there were some issues. Let's be honest, there were some real issues in things like MIDI, you know, plug-in delay compensation. There were all sorts of problems going on because in version 1 it had been built to react to certain things in certain ways, and then version 2, there's, oh, this new technology's out, we'll whack this on the side. Version 3, oh, this new technology's out, we'll just pat this one in here. And it, you know, these new technologies were just kind of shoved in the code and sort of tickled their way into it. And then by version 8 or 9, you could see it was really starting to crack at the sides. Version 10, I'm withholding any opinion on because I've never used it, never looked at it, but to my understanding, they built version 10 from the ground up, which is why there was such a huge gap between version 9 and version 10. So I'm going to assume that they fixed everything in version 10. You guys tell me. So I think if you were building a DAW today, then you know what technology is available. You're probably going to be at an advantage to all the others out there. That's one of the reasons why I think Bitwig have done such a fantastic job. And even more than that, they built Bitwig in a way that they did things like separating the audio engine from the main workstation engine. So the coding is all different, which means you can tweak one without affecting the other, and they built that with everything I've just explained in mind. So it means they're kind of future-proofing it as well. So it means when new technology comes out, they can open up one box without having to have a huge knock-on effect on all the others. So I think that's very clever. However, going back to the Behringer DAW, I mean, their synths are good, and I don't know. I can't really say that it's. I'm not. In fact, I'm not saying it's going to be crap, because I honestly don't know. I don't know. I've not even seen what they're basing it on. I'm assuming they're basing it on Ardour or something, because Ardour is like an open source DAW, which is fine. Who knows? But what I'm saying is I wouldn't have high hopes for it being as good as Ableton, because Ableton have, you know, a lot of staff working, and that's all they've ever done is worked on digital audio workstations their entire career, and they know what they're doing. Whereas I'm going to guess the staff at Behringer have never made a DAW before, unless they're taking all of Ableton's staff or something. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. And finally, Gold Toast. I think you misunderstood my question a bit about processing synths. I don't think I was clear enough, and that's my bad. I chose the deadmau5 pluck as an example because it is, as you say, no secret and very simple to make. Saw with low pass filter and some automation on the cutoff. Last week I tried to recreate the opening of the Velt. The beginning is just the synth and bass, so it's a good reference point. Using the same MIDI notes can be found online really easy. Just download it, and I tell you, you cannot get it to sound as good as the original track, or at least I can't. Please try it for yourself. I can get about 90% there, but it's simple, just not as good. There is definitely some processing on that synth, multiband compression, saturation, and maybe even some slight distortion as well. Of course, some delay and reverb. Maybe it's because he most likely used analog gear for both the synth and processing, but who knows. So first things first, he probably didn't use analog gear for the pluck. Only because if I remember rightly, when he first did that pluck sound, when it became famous, I seem to remember seeing it on his laptop, and it was a soft synth. Couldn't tell you which one, wasn't paying enough attention. But there's probably some processing. So I see what you're saying anyway. Yeah, in which case I would suggest possibly some saturation, but just be very, very careful and have the saturation before the reverb. A very, very subtle amount, and probably some multiband compression. But I would suggest, if you use Ableton, use the Ableton multiband compression and use upward compression on the higher frequencies. I bet you that's what you're hearing. I don't know the Velt enough. I don't know enough of deadmau5's music to know exactly what he's doing there, and I've not tried to recreate it, but I should imagine there'll be some Ableton multiband compressor, and if I remember rightly, on Ableton you've got the 3 bands, the high, mid, low, and on the high band there's like you can hover over the graphic and slide it up or down, I think, and if you slide it up it becomes upward compression. Yeah, give that a go, because I'm fairly sure that's going to be on there. I would be surprised. I mean, he may be using analog gear, but the point is that it won't make a difference when it comes to something like that. It's not that shine in his music isn't there purely because of it being analog. It's just that whatever he's doing with that analog stuff sounds great. He could probably do it just as well on digital or VST or inside the box. Yeah, so keep trying, but I don't know the answer. But I would say try that multiband thing. Other than that, I can't think of anything else that he would have done on there. The other thing then is just the final mix and master. A lot of it comes down to the final mix and master, and especially with the master, because it's about getting that shine in the stereo balance and the high frequencies, and getting that sort of nice spread. And I think there's a lot of that in his music. There is, I don't get me wrong, there is always been something somewhat magical about deadmau5's productions when it comes to that quality of sound, and he must have some sort of trick up his sleeve, in the same way as Dada Life. They always managed to get that saw wave bass that just felt impossible to be able to recreate that Dada Life saw wave bass. And I don't know what they did, but Who knows? There's something magical going on there, and I guess that's their secret that they'll take with them until they die. And you know what? Actually, this maybe reinforces something I've said before, where I've always said as advice to music producers, try not to sound like someone else. And I think that's probably the reason why, is because if you try doing those deadmau5 plucks that deadmau5 got famous for, the best you will ever sound is just like deadmau5. And if you try and make that saw wave bass like Dad Alive, the best you'll ever be is a second-rate Dad Alive. And is that really your end goal? I'm not speaking directly to you, Gold Toast, here, because I do think trying to imitate other producers' work is a good training exercise. And I think from the sounds of what you're saying, that's exactly what you're doing. So you're doing the right thing. I'm not directing this at you. But as general advice, you want your music to sound original. So try not to do the plucks, try not to do the saw wave bass, try something different. I don't know. Because like I say, I always remember there was a period where, as a sound designer, people would constantly ask me, how do you make that Skrillex bass? And, it was just the most asked question on earth. And the thing is if you ever made that Skrillex bass, you'd only ever sound like a second-rate Skrillex. And is that really what you want to be known for? I don't think it is. So, yeah, just as an aside thing, I think that's something that most people need to hear sometimes. Anyway, I do agree with you that most of the time it's easier to fix the problems earlier in the chain, like the sound design itself. Absolutely. And sometimes you'd be surprised, with those plucks, for example. I don't know what it is, but sometimes it's the way that VSTs gain stage, and sometimes it can be things like the number of voices. If you've got two voices, if you have one voice on your oscillator, it'll sound thin, and if you have two voices, it'll sound nice and thick. That's common sense. But sometimes if you go 4 voices, 5 voices, 6 voices, it gets worse. So sometimes it's a case of dialing in little things like the number of voices on each oscillator. Sometimes that can have a huge effect. Other times it can be depending on what octave range you're in. Sometimes there will be harmonics as well. So with things like the Velts, again, I haven't seen deadmau5's work for a very long time, but I know he used to have, like, say the chord was a C major, let's say, so he'd have a note on C0, a note on C1, a note on C2, and then he'd have his second note as E2 or whatever, and that was, so he'd have sort of the octave or 3 octaves of bass notes, and that really thickened everything out. But again, you'd then need to play with the amount of voices because you're adding in so many additionals. So yeah, there's a lot to it, but without hearing it, I don't suppose there's much I can do. Hope that makes my question more clear, and sorry for the wall of text. You're welcome. Cheers. And that, my friends, is it for this week. Yeah, I mean, as always, stay safe and sensible. Yeah, if you are stuck and bored and whatever, then let me know in the comments and we'll see if we can get some sort of entertainment on the go. Otherwise, I will see you same time next week. Oh, I haven't given you a word for a high five. Let's have a look. Preferably a word everyone can spell, because I can barely spell things like Lamborghini. Let's have a look. Well, I mean, I can't do coronavirus again, can I? But that's basically everything coming up in my feed. There we go. Let's use that, I guess. No, let's use that stream. I think that's easier, isn't it? Everyone knows about live streams, so stream. If you've made it to the end of this video, then please comment the word stream and I'll give you a high five in next week's video. Either way, thank you very much. Stay safe and I'll see you next week. Cheers.